Don't mind me just leaving AutoZone to get a new battery here in the Ram. This cold weather kills batteries, plus it was about 4 years old anyway, so it was time. It was about time. But anyway, it's about time to do part 2 of my story. So when I left you last, I had just started mowing and just started learning how to use some equipment. I had my yard and my grandparents' yard that was about a mile away from us, or no, less than that. It was walking distance away. It was around the block from us at the time where we lived. So anyway, in the year 2000, so I was 12 years old at the time, we ended up moving about 25 miles away, 30 miles away or so. So those, I wasn't really working for Grandma and Grandpa anymore. I had a yard up there to maintain, my dad's, mom and dad's new house. But as I got older, I was 12 years old, almost 13 years old. So I started working with a gentleman that I knew at the time. I still know him. He's just retired from lawn care right now. You've seen him on one of my other videos. Charlie is his name. But anyway, I started working for Charlie, and Charlie was in the commercial lawn care industry at the time, and he had a lawn care business. He did about 20 or 25 yards in the area, so I would work with him on the weekends. And the first time I ever worked for him, I remember it was the first time I'd ever used a real commercial mower, a real 21-inch mower. So this was an old Toro Pro Line 21-inch from the mid to late 90s. It had a Kawasaki FJ series engine on it, the really early ones, the big square box looking ones with the muffler on the side and the oil filter sticking out at like a 45-degree angle. You've probably seen them before. They're very common. But anyway, that was the first commercial mower I ever used, and I remember going to his house, and I was like 12 years old, maybe 13, probably 12 or 13, something like that. I remember going to his house the first time, and he said, "Here, get this mower on here. Let's mow my yard." I mowed his yard for him the first time. I guess it was kind of like a job interview, so to speak. But I got to mowing on that thing, and I mean, I'm used to a homeowner grade Craftsman mower, so I'm not used to this commercial mower with 3 speeds and rear wheel drive. And so I took off, and I mean, I'm running behind this mower. It was pulling 4 miles an hour on top speed, and I'm running behind this mower like it's. I remember him and my dad were both standing there laughing at me because I'm sitting there. I'm running down the street with this mower. I'm trying to turn this mower with the handle down, and I'm turning this mower, as it's going full speed in the alley, and they're both laughing at me. That was my first taste of commercial mowing, and I needless to say, they had to put it on speed 1 for me, and it was still too fast. So when I mowed with Charlie, he kept me at speed 1 for a few weeks, then he kept me at speed 2, and finally, after about, a month or 2 months, I was able to mow with that mower at full speed. And I didn't work with him a whole lot early on. The first couple of years, I only did a couple of days with him when I was 13, 14. Time I got 15 and 16, though, when I turned 16, I got my driver's license. And so I was able to drive myself down to where he lived. He lived about, between me and Grandma, he lived. So it wasn't no thing to drive down to his place and meet up with him and go out and mow. So I mowed with him off and on the rest of my high school years, and I got acclimated. When I was working with him, I got acclimated to using the string trimmers and the blade edgers and that sort of thing. He ran steel and Echo equipment, so I got to use the top of the line trimmers and edgers. He was more of a handheld / attachment blower series guy, so he never had a backpack blower. used handheld blowers. You could say he was kind of like Big Son's Lawn Care, one of the guys that I follow on here. He's a big handheld blowers guy, and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly all right. He was that was Charlie's thing. So we anyway, I worked with him for a few years, and then I graduated from high school, and I went to college, and in college, you could say, my dabbling phase. I dabbled with the business in college a lot. I wasn't full in, but I wasn't full out either. Like I would do, I mowed yards for a couple of the professors at the college that I went to, because it was a very small college, and I knew everybody there, and it was kind of like I had some previous family connections there, so I was, I wasn't like I guess you could say I didn't have like special privileges per se, other than my job at the time. I worked in the maintenance department there, so I had a lot of responsibilities. But I did some work for some of the people there, and while I was getting my business degree. But I remember, sitting there in class, and I'd be looking on Craigslist for lawnmowers, and I'd be sitting there in class while the professor is talking about something, I don't know. It was a Bible college, so, they could have been talking about Bible stuff at the time. I don't know, but I remember in my head just thinking, about mowing and mowing equipment, and, how I was going to plan my next move. And I was kind of laying the framework in my head of how I was going to do things, but I didn't have the confidence. Yet to undertake it, and I didn't have the resources at the time to make it work financially. I mean, obviously I wasn't married, so I didn't have a wife or kids to deal with, but I wasn't making a lot of money, so it wasn't something where I could necessarily go out and buy a $10,000, or I guess at the time they would have been $6,000 zero turn or something like that. So I was kind of stuck in a very limited position. So I did work for myself through college, kind of side work, a couple of jobs a week. And I remember buying my first, it was a big deal for me when I bought my first commercial trimmer, as it were. I bought a old Echo SRM 210 from Home Depot. It was it had been a returned model, so it had been returned recently. And I was happy. I mean, I was like, man, I've arrived. I have a commercial trimmer. And I went out and bought I got on eBay. This was back a long time ago. I got on eBay when it was still relatively new, and I actually I found a Snapper 21-inch mower with that very similar Kawasaki engine with the oil filter off to the side and whatnot. And I found that machine for a good price, and I bought my first commercial mower on eBay, and I was like, man, I've arrived. I have all the things that I need to go make money. And I bought a truck, my first truck at the time. It was a piece of junk, but it worked for me for a few years. It worked. I had that truck until I bought Big Red, ironically, the truck that I still have to this day. I bought that truck in 2008, and I still have it now, and I don't plan to get rid of it. That's a separate story all in itself, the Big Red story. But my dabbling phase. So after college, I continued to steadily upgrade equipment. I bought a trailer and a 32-inch Toro mower with the T-bar, the old walk-behind style. I bought one of those from Charlie back in 2008 as well. So I was kind of, getting to where I was trying to maybe go out and do more work on my own. But at the same time, I was graduating school, and I got a job at the time. I needed to get a job, so I went to Home Depot, and I got a job at working full-time at Home Depot. So I worked in the electrical and lighting department at Home Depot, and people might think, oh, that's bizarre, but given my maintenance background, I knew pretty much, all this stuff about framing and construction and electricity and, minor stuff about plumbing and whatnot. I knew a little bit more about paint too than I than I did like flooring, for example. I didn't know anything about flooring, and I didn't want to know anything about flooring. To this day, I hate flooring. But so they put me in electrical and lighting, and this was 2011. Was this full-time job that I had. So I was working there. And at the time, I kind of sold some equipment, and I kind of, thought, well, maybe I'll get out of the business, and maybe I'll get into the business more. I still was dabbling. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do things. And so looking back on it, I did learn a lot at Home Depot, but I kind of wasted some time, some valuable time that my body had. I wasted some energy that I could have been better using to build my customer base and build up my workability. But I didn't do that, and instead, I worked at Home Depot for a couple of years. Well, I got stagnated at that job finally, and I decided to put in my 2 weeks. I didn't necessarily have a plan per se at the time, but I knew, I needed to do something more, and I needed to get something better. So I had a few options at the time that I wanted to pursue, and one of them was full-time lawn care. So I actually tried for a couple of weeks. I thought, well, I'll try to dabble in this a little bit, and I went kind of back in a little bit and tried to, I did some advertising. I made a website. I kind of tried to put myself out there again, and I got, to that point where I was nervous. I wasn't sure I could make it work for everyday income and for a yearly. I wasn't sure I could build, my financial future on just, cutting grass, doing lawn services, doing landscaping work, that sort of thing. So once again, I decided, well, I need a job that I can do using the skills that I have. So I actually went back to my alma mater where I went to college, and I worked there again. This time I was the assistant facilities manager, and then later I was the full-on director, as they call it, the director of facilities. So I, was responsible. I managed the facilities at that college. And at the time I was working for a few people on the side, and I was kind of dabbling still in it, but some people told me, oh man, you can sell off your business and sell off your equipment, and you can, stop everything what you're doing now and just focus on this job. And deep down, I knew I couldn't do that. And it's hard to explain, but I just felt like I had this calling, and this more, like I was called to do more than just be, a maintenance manager per se, and, just an overseer of a facility, and while it was a fairly okay job, it did have a lot of stress. It was a very high stress job compared to doing lawn service and landscaping. It was a very high stressful job. There was a lot of, stuff that was broken constantly, and, there's a lot of people's egos you had to manage, and there was a lot of people who were higher up than you who had opinions that you had to manage, and none of them had a clue about any of that. That school had 5 vice presidents, and not a one of them had a clue about maintenance, especially my boss at the time. She was a finance lady, and she knew a lot about finances, but she didn't have a clue about how to run a campus from a facility standpoint. So during that stretch of time when I was dabbling, I ended up selling off that 32-inch T-bar Toro, and I bought a Gravely Compact Pro 34, which, if you know what that is, you can see it in some of my early videos on this channel. I had it up until the beginning of this year, middle of this year, or last year rather. I ended up selling that mower. I sold that mower early last year, March or April of last year, just because of I wasn't going to be doing riding mowing anymore. But so I bought this Gravely Compact Pro 34, and I got a great deal on it. I had to drive to Waco to get it, and it was one of those things where I was like, man, I've arrived at, where I need to be at, and I've got the mower I need to be doing what I'm doing, focusing on small residential areas and, doing all of this and getting through gates. And, I bought a 30-inch mower in 2015, so I had a 30-inch mower. So I was, I felt like I was making it, in terms of, I gotta go this way. I felt like I was making it from the term of I'm doing it on the side. I'm not, putting all my eggs in this basket, but I've got the pieces in place. I've got commercial, I run steel equipment, I've got a backpack blower, I've got a truck and a trailer. If I need to do it, if I want to do it again, I can go full-time into it. And deep down, that's really what I wanted to do. And it really got to a point where that's all I wanted to do, while meanwhile I was at this full-time job that was just, it was wearing me out. A lot of the gray you see here in this beard is because of that full-time job. There was a lot of stress that came with that, whether it was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, phone calls saying, oh, there's a water leak at so-and-so, or some major problem occurring and you having to stay till midnight to deal with it, or issues that come with old buildings and old things like that you're responsible to manage ultimately. And so it really took a toll on me stress-wise, to the point where I was ready to be done with that. I was just like, I need something else, and I looked for other jobs. I applied for several jobs. I looked for city work, and I looked for other, facilities work and other places. And, I thought to myself, maybe this is what I need to do, and I do need to sell off all my equipment, and I do need to just stop this dream. This dream doesn't matter. I need to just put this to rest, because at the time I was married too. I got married in 2014, 2015. So I was married, I had to deal with that. We didn't have any kids, obviously. We're expecting our first child now, but at the time, we were trying to have a child, so we weren't sure, how that was going to work. And I'm like, if I have a kid, I can't support a kid just driving around cutting grass, for a living, or doing landscaping work. There's no, I had it in my head to where this was side money, not main money. And that's kind of where I was for a good 10 years, ever since I started out, up until a few years back. And one of the main reasons for that is that Charlie, the guy that I worked with, that was how he ran his. He was a, side money kind of guy. He didn't ever do this full time. He did this on the side, and he didn't do, he worked another job, or a couple more jobs. And it was, the times we talked about going full time, I think a lot of his struggles were the same as the ones I was thinking about. Excuse me. A lot of the struggles he was dealing with were some of the same ones I was dealing with, where we weren't sure how we were going to make it work financially with, wives and families, and even with, even just by yourself, it's a lot to handle. And I think he could have been more than what he was. And I, at the time, was wrestling with whether I could be more than I was at the time. And, I prayed a lot about it. I thought about it a lot. I mulled it over. I went back and forth in my head about everything that was going on with this opportunity and with this with what I could do for myself. And eventually it ended up to where, you know, God answered my prayer in that regard. My hand was forced in a sense. And that will be the beginning of part 3, where I discuss my present situation as well as the future. So thank you for watching part 2 of my story, and I'll leave it at that. My hand was forced. We'll see where we go from here. Enjoy this time and stay tuned for next time.